Look at her, still wearing those bargain bin sweaters, my sister said, her voice slicing through the Saturday evening chatter. Forks paused midair. A ripple of laughter moved around the table like a sudden draft, cold and unwelcome. Don't miss a single second of this gripping true-to-life revenge story. Every moment builds to a twist that will leave you stunned. I tightened my grip on the warm coffee mug in front of me. The ceramic edge pressed into my palm, grounding me against the sting of her words. My heart thumped once hard, but my face stayed calm. I had promised myself weeks ago that I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. The clock on the wall ticked towards 7:45 p.m., each second a small drumbeat under the clink of silverware. Outside, an early winter wind rattled the bare branches against the kitchen window. Inside, the smell of roast chicken and buttery rolls mingled with the sharper scent of red wine. It should have been comforting. Instead, every detail felt exaggerated, like a scene lit too brightly on a stage where I was meant to play the fool. "Thrift store chic again?" she added, pretending to examine the sleeve of my cardigan. "At least it matches your budget." Her smirk widened, teeth catching the light from the chandelier. My brother coughed into his napkin, failing to hide a grin. My mother's eyes darted between us, a silent plea for peace, but she didn't speak. No one ever stopped my sister when she was on a roll. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitterness steady me. Not tonight, I reminded myself. Tonight I had more important things than a verbal sparring match. The paperwork tucked away in my handbag, a single folder of neatly signed contracts, was proof of months of quiet planning. They didn't know it existed. Not yet. "You're awfully quiet," my sister pressed. "Come on, don't you have a funny story from wherever it is you spend your time?" Her husband shifted in his chair. The movement was small, but I noticed. He always noticed me. He also knew more than he let on, though he kept his gaze fixed on his plate. "I was just thinking how nice it is to have everyone together," I said evenly. My voice sounded almost cheerful, and that alone seemed to frustrate her. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, the pearls at her neck catching the soft glow of the chandelier. "Nice? Or free? Because free is kind of your brand, isn't it?" Another round of laughter. Even the kids at the far end of the table giggled, though they likely didn't understand the barb. I smiled as if her words meant nothing. Inside, a different warmth spread, steady, deliberate. Let them laugh. By the end of the night, I would walk away holding something far richer than their approval. The conversation shifted to vacation plans, mortgage rates, and holiday sales. I let their voices wash over me, pretending to be half interested while cataloging every detail. My sister bragged about the kitchen remodel she planned for spring. My brother debated interest rates like he owned the bank. I nodded in the right places, my mind on the folder hidden in my bag. Under the table, I flexed my fingers to release the tension. The faint vibration of my phone in my pocket buzzed once. An alert I had set earlier. A tiny reminder that tonight's dinner was more than a family gathering. It was the quiet countdown to a reveal none of them would see coming. "Another roll?" my mother offered, trying to cut through the growing tension. I declined with a polite shake of my head. My appetite had vanished hours ago, replaced by a restless anticipation that tasted sharper than any wine. Halfway through dessert, my sister returned to her favorite subject. Me. "So," she began, slicing into her pie, "any new projects? Or are you still, keeping busy with your little side things?" I caught the faint emphasis on little. My chest tightened, but not from shame. If only she knew how large those side things had become. "Just a few small plans," I said lightly. "Nothing worth boring everyone with." Her husband looked up then, eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second. In that glance lay a quiet acknowledgement, a flicker of something close to respect, or maybe anticipation. He knew. At least, he knew enough to understand the night was not as simple as my sister believed. The wind outside picked up, whistling against the old window panes. The sound filled the brief silence like an omen. My sister tapped her fork against her plate, restless. "You always were the mysterious one," she said. "Hiding things." I tilted my head, meeting her stare. Not everything needs to be on display to have value. Her eyes narrowed, the sparkle of amusement fading just slightly. A small victory, but I savored it. Conversation limped on, but the air had shifted. I could feel it in the way my brother checked his watch more often, in the slight frown on my mother's face, in the way my sister's husband avoided looking at her when she spoke. Something fragile trembled beneath the surface, ready to break. I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of refilling the coffee pot. Alone for a moment, I leaned against the counter, breathing in the rich scent of brewed coffee and lemon dish soap. My reflection in the dark window stared back, calm, steady, and far from the helpless woman they thought they knew. From the dining room, I heard my sister's laugh ring out again, louder now, as if to reassert control. A familiar ache flickered in my chest, the echo of years spent as her favorite target. But tonight that ache felt different, sharper but also strangely empowering. I reached into my bag and brushed my fingers across the folder's smooth surface. The papers inside represented late-night calls, careful negotiations, and a quiet brilliance I had never flaunted. They were my shield, my proof, my silent thunder. When I returned to the table, I caught my sister watching me with a curious tilt of her head. "You look pleased," she said. "Just enjoying the evening," I replied, sliding back into my seat. The kids began a game of guessing Christmas gifts, their voices a cheerful distraction. I played along, laughing at their wild guesses, all the while aware of the tension curling beneath the laughter like a hidden current. As plates were cleared and coffee poured, my sister leaned closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You know," she said, "you could save yourself a lot of trouble if you just admit you'll never catch up. Some of us are just built for success." Her breath smelled faintly of cinnamon and wine. Her eyes glittered with triumph. I met her gaze and smiled, slow and deliberate. "Funny," I said softly, "I was just thinking the same thing." For the first time all night she faltered. Her smirk wavered, confusion flickering across her face. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind outside stilled for a moment. I felt the weight of the folder in my bag like a heartbeat, steady and sure. I wanted to say more, to drop a single hint sharp enough to cut, but I held it back. Timing was everything, and tonight's finale wasn't ready yet. Instead, I reached for my coffee, letting the silence stretch until it became its own quiet statement. My sister looked away first. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 8 times, each note echoing like a countdown. I sat back, calm and unshaken, my secret safe for now, my plan already in motion. Whatever came next would not only change the conversation. It would change the balance of power in this family forever. The grandfather clock's final chimes still echoed in my ears as I drove home through the quiet streets. The night air clung to the windshield, heavy with the promise of frost. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, but inside, I hummed with the steady rhythm of victory held just out of sight. My sister thought she had silenced me with her laughter. She didn't know the real game had already begun. When I stepped into my small house, the familiar scent of cedar and faint laundry soap wrapped around me like a shield. I hung my coat on the crooked hook by the door, the same one I'd hammered in myself years ago when money was tight. The place looked modest, second-hand furniture, a patchwork rug, but every corner carried the quiet strength of choices made on my terms. Tonight it also held the electric charge of secrets. I set my handbag on the kitchen table and slid out the folder, its edges crisp against my fingertips. The papers inside represented months of quiet work. Late-night calls, careful research, and numbers that could rewrite the story my family told about me. I traced the edge of the top page, savoring the clean weight of possibility. The clock on the stove blinked 9:17 p.m. Too late to call my contact, but not too late to prepare. I brewed a small pot of chamomile tea, the steam fogging the cold window as I laid out my notes. Each page carried a piece of the life they refused to imagine for me. A life built from thrift, grit, and a mind they dismissed as sweet but simple. Let them keep underestimating me. Made every step easier. My phone buzzed softly against the counter. A text from Mark, my financial advisor and oldest friend. "All contracts reviewed. We're on track for Monday." I exhaled, a slow release of tension. Monday. 3 days away. My sister's next round of insults would barely have time to leave her lips before the first checks cleared. I typed back a simple thank you and resisted the urge to add the flood of emotions sitting behind those words. Mark had known me since college, back when I was the quiet girl taking extra shifts to cover tuition. He never pitied me for my thrift store clothes. He just saw the way I studied numbers the way some people studied faces. I carried the folder to the small desk in my bedroom, the same desk where I once helped my son build model airplanes. Now it held spreadsheets, legal contracts, and a slim laptop humming with hidden power. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, a scent that always calmed me before a big move. I powered on the laptop and opened the encrypted files Mark had sent earlier. The numbers glowed softly in the dim light, rows of data that looked meaningless to anyone else but pulsed with quiet promise to me. As I reviewed the documents, memories of the dinner replayed in flashes. My sister's smirk, my mother's nervous eyes, the way my brother-in-law avoided her gaze. That last detail stayed with me. He knew something, maybe more than I'd guessed. His subtle nods during dinner hadn't been accidents. But what exactly had he heard? And how much of my plan had already reached his ears? A small worry prickled at the edge of my thoughts. If he spoke too soon, the timing could unravel. I needed the deal to stay silent until the ink dried. I made a note to call Mark first thing in the morning and double-check confidentiality agreements. The house creaked as the night settled in. From the hallway, the faint hum of the refrigerator blended with the occasional tick of cooling pipes. I had lived here long enough to know each sound by heart. Tonight they felt like allies, wrapping me in a cocoon of secrecy. I worked until nearly midnight, pausing only to stretch stiff fingers and sip cooling tea. My eyes burned, but my mind remained sharp. Every contract I double-checked, every email I drafted carried me closer to the moment my sister's laughter would turn to silence. Still, a flicker of doubt crept in. What if something went wrong? What if the market shifted overnight? At 65, I had no room for reckless risks. But then I thought of my sister's sneer, the dismissive tilt of her chin, and the doubt hardened into resolve. Just as I prepared to shut down the computer, another text arrived. This time from David, my sister's husband. Can we meet tomorrow? Need to discuss something important. My pulse jumped. We rarely communicated directly. I stared at the message, heart thudding, weighing possibilities. Did he suspect the deal? Was he ready to betray my sister? Or warn her? The ambiguity tightened like a knot in my chest. I typed back a careful reply. Tomorrow afternoon works. Coffee shop on Main? His answer came quickly. Perfect. 3 p.m. I set the phone down, the screen glowing in the dark like a secret beacon. Meeting him could be dangerous, but it might also be the final piece I needed. Unable to sleep, I paced the living room, the carpet soft under my bare feet. The walls were lined with framed photos. My son's graduation, old camping trips, quiet milestones no one outside this house ever celebrated. They were reminders of the life I had built without applause. My family had always mistaken my modesty for failure. They never understood that real power often hides behind simple doors. At 2 a.m., exhaustion finally pulled me toward bed. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft tick of the clock on the nightstand. Each second carried me closer to Monday. Closer to the moment when the story of the broke single mom would collapse under the weight of undeniable truth. Morning arrived with a pale gray light and the smell of rain drifting through the cracked window. I dressed in comfortable jeans and a navy sweater, deliberately plain. Blending in had become my armor. Over breakfast, I reviewed the day's tasks, confirm funding, finalize Monday's meeting agenda, and prepare for the conversation with David. My hands moved automatically, slicing toast, stirring coffee, while my mind raced through scenarios. If he offered inside information, I'd need to decide how much to trust him. If he threatened exposure, I'd need leverage. By noon, I sat at my desk again, cross-checking numbers with Mark over a secure call. His steady voice calmed me as we reviewed last-minute details. Everything's airtight, he assured me. By Monday morning, they'll have no choice but to recognize your role. Good, I said softly. That's all I need. After we hung up, I printed the final set of documents and slipped them into the folder, smoothing the edges like a ritual. The paper smelled faintly of fresh ink and promise. I locked the folder in my briefcase, the click of the latch a small but satisfying sound. At 2:45, I headed to the coffee shop, rain tapping lightly against the windshield. My heart beat a steady rhythm of anticipation and caution. Inside the cafe, the warm scent of roasted beans mingled with the soft buzz of conversation. David was already there, seated near the window, his expression unreadable. He stood when he saw me, offering a polite smile. "Thanks for meeting," he said as I joined him. I returned the smile, masking my curiosity. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to be lost in the cafe noise. I think you and I both know your sister underestimates you. And I think it's time someone corrected that. A jolt ran through me. He wasn't warning me, he was inviting me into something deeper. But what did he really want? And how much was he willing to risk? I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the spoon clink against the cup to buy time. That's an interesting observation, I said, keeping my tone light. He watched me carefully as if measuring each breath. I can help, he said finally. But we need to be smart. His words hung between us, heavy with possibilities and danger. I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the quiet thrill of a plan expanding in real time. Still, I kept my face calm, my voice steady. Smart is exactly what I had in mind, I replied. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking the window with silver lines. Inside, our conversation threaded a new layer of intrigue into a plan that was already delicate. As I left the cafe, briefcase clutched tightly, I felt the weight of more than just paperwork. The game had shifted again, and now another player had stepped onto the board. Whether David was an ally or a threat remained to be seen. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, watching the rain blur the streetlights into soft halos. My sister's voice from last night echoed in my head, mocking, certain, blind. She believed I had nothing worth hiding. She couldn't have been more wrong. I started the engine, the quiet purr matching the steady beat of my resolve. Monday was coming fast, and with it a revelation that would change everything. For now, the secret remained mine, locked behind closed doors where they still couldn't see. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop for a long minute, the engine humming softly beneath me. Rain streaked the windshield in thin silver threads, blurring the streetlights into soft halos. My briefcase rested on the passenger seat, heavy with more than papers. Inside it lay the deal that would change everything, and the unanswered questions David had just dropped into my lap. His words echoed in my head as I eased into traffic. Your sister underestimates you. It's time someone corrected that. Was it an offer of help, a warning, or something darker? The calm certainty in his voice had unsettled me more than I cared to admit. By the time I reached home, the rain had slowed to a mist that clung to my hair as I fumbled with the keys. The house smelled faintly of damp cedar and brewed coffee, a comfort I usually welcomed. Tonight it felt like a thin curtain hiding something restless. I hung my coat and set the briefcase on the hallway table, the click of the latch echoing too loudly in the quiet. I moved through my nightly routine, feeding the cat, wiping down the counters, locking the back door, but every small sound sharpened my thoughts. David's glance across the table, the careful way he'd chosen his words, the hint of urgency in his eyes. He knew something. Maybe more than I did. The next morning, a pale sun filtered through the kitchen window, lighting the steam rising from my coffee. I opened the newspaper out of habit but found myself rereading the same line without comprehension. My mind kept circling back to David. Why reach out now after years of polite distance? And why the sudden interest in correcting my sister? Before I could chase the thought further, my phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Funding confirmed. Monday is locked. Relief washed through me, warm and steady. One step closer. Yet the timing of David's approach scratched at my nerves. Did he somehow know the deal was finalized? Or was it coincidence? A husband finally tired of his wife's arrogance? I spent the late morning reviewing final figures, the soft clatter of my keyboard mixing with the occasional drip from the eaves outside. Each number tightened the weave of my plan. Still, doubt crept in like a draft through an old window. Secrets rarely stay buried, and my sister had a talent for sniffing out anything that threatened her spotlight. At noon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My heart jumped before logic caught up. Probably a package. Still, I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door cautiously. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Reed, holding a small envelope. This was in my mailbox by mistake, she said with a warm smile. Thought you'd want it right away. Thank you, I replied, returning the smile though my pulse quickened. The envelope bore no return address, only my name in neat block letters. After she left, I closed the door and studied the envelope. The paper felt thick, expensive. Inside was a single sheet of plain stationery with one handwritten line. Not everyone at the table is loyal. No signature. No explanation. My stomach tightened. Was this a prank? A warning? I scanned the street through the front window, but only the quiet afternoon met my eyes. I set the note beside my laptop and forced myself back to work, though my fingers trembled slightly on the keyboard. If someone outside the family knew about Monday's deal, the circle of suspicion had just widened. By mid-afternoon I couldn't concentrate. I slipped on a jacket and walked the neighborhood, the damp air smelling of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. Each crunch of gravel underfoot steadied me, but the note burned in my pocket like a hidden ember. Who would send such a message and why now? As I rounded the corner near the park, I spotted a familiar car parked along the curb. David's. He sat behind the wheel, phone pressed to his ear, eyes scanning the street. When his gaze briefly met mine, he gave a quick nod before looking away as if nothing were unusual. I kept walking, heart pounding. Had he followed me? Or was this another coincidence too neat to ignore? I resisted the urge to confront him then and there. Better to watch, to gather my own clues before showing my hand. That evening, I prepared a simple dinner of tomato soup and buttered toast, the comforting smells failing to quiet the storm inside me. I replayed every detail of the day, the anonymous note, David's sudden appearance, the way he'd avoided my eyes in the car. Each piece fit too neatly into a puzzle I couldn't yet see. After washing the dishes, I checked my phone. Another message from David. Tomorrow night. Same place. Important. No greeting, no explanation. I stared at the screen, weighing my options. Ignoring him might be safer, but curiosity gnawed at me. If he held information that could protect my plan, or threaten it, I needed to know. Sleep came in restless fragments. I dreamed of locked doors and whispered conversations, of papers scattering in a cold wind while my sister laughed somewhere unseen. When morning finally arrived, gray and damp, I felt as if I'd spent the night running. Determined to reclaim some control, I threw myself into preparations. I triple-checked the contracts, called Mark for final confirmations, and even rehearsed potential questions David might spring on me. His involvement remained the one variable I couldn't calculate. By late afternoon, small signs of unease began surfacing like cracks in ice. My mother left a voicemail asking if everything was all right between you girls, her tone oddly strained. My brother sent a casual text about Monday's weather, something he never did. Each message carried the faint scent of suspicion, as if whispers were already circulating. At dusk, I headed back to the coffee shop for the second meeting. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective. Inside, the warm scent of espresso mingled with the soft hiss of milk steaming behind the counter. David was already there, seated at the same window table, his expression unreadable. "You got my note," he said quietly as I sat down. My breath caught. "That was from you?" He nodded, eyes steady. "Consider it a warning. People talk more than they realize. Your sister suspects something." A chill slid down my spine despite the cafe's warmth. "What exactly does she know?" "Not much," he said. "But enough to start digging. I thought you deserved a head start." I studied his face, searching for hidden motives. Was he protecting me, undermining her, or playing a game of his own? "Why help me?" I asked. His mouth tightened. "Because I'm tired of watching her tear you down. And because some deals are better made with the person who actually does the work." His words hung between us, heavy with implication. My pulse quickened. Was he hinting at more than partnership? I kept my voice calm. "I appreciate the warning. But I can handle my sister." He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "Just be careful. She's sharper than she looks." As we parted, he slipped a small flash drive across the table. "Insurance," he said simply. "Use it if you need leverage." Back in my car, I turned the drive over in my hand, the metal cool against my skin. Inside it might be answers. Or another layer of danger. Either way, it was another clue in a game that was no longer just mine. The night deepened as I drove home, the road glistening like black glass under the streetlights. My reflection in the windshield looked both familiar and strange. Older, steadier, and sharper than the woman my family still believed me to be. Inside the house, I locked the doors and set the flash drive beside the anonymous note. Two small objects, each carrying the weight of shifting loyalties. My sister's laughter from that dinner table echoed faintly in memory, but now it sounded different, less certain, edged with the fear she hadn't yet recognized. I powered up my laptop and slid the flash drive into the port. A folder popped open, its contents neatly labeled but unreadable without passwords. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Whatever secrets David had given me would have to wait. For now, I closed the laptop and turned off the light, the room falling into quiet darkness. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the windows like a whispered warning. The tension had thickened, but so had my resolve. Each small clue, each careful step, brought me closer to the moment when silence would no longer protect anyone. The wind rattled my windows like a whispered warning as I powered down the laptop, leaving David's mysterious flash drive locked in my desk drawer. Monday was almost here, and tonight's family dinner would be my last chance to stay invisible before everything changed. I dressed deliberately, choosing a charcoal sweater and simple black slacks, neutral armor that neither invited ridicule nor revealed the quiet storm beneath my calm. The air outside bit at my cheeks as I stepped into the evening, the damp scent of fallen leaves clinging to the breeze. My car's engine hummed a low reassurance as I drove toward my sister's house, each passing streetlight marking the slow march toward confrontation. The neighborhood glowed with soft porch lights and the faint scent of wood smoke. When I parked at the curb, I paused for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until the leather warmed beneath my palms. Inside my briefcase lay the contracts that proved my quiet triumph. I wouldn't reveal them tonight, but their presence steadied me like a hidden blade. As I approached the front door, laughter floated from inside, bright and brittle. I rang the bell and forced a smile when my mother opened the door. Her eyes flicked to the briefcase in my hand before settling on my face. "You came," she said, relief softening her voice. "Of course," I replied, stepping into the familiar warmth of roasted chicken and polished wood. The living room buzzed with conversation, the clink of glasses blending with soft music. My sister stood near the fireplace, a glass of wine in hand, pearls gleaming against her dark sweater. Her smile tightened when she saw me. "Well, look who decided to join us," she said, her tone smooth but sharp at the edges. "I was beginning to think you had bigger plans." "Just dinner," I answered evenly, setting my coat on the rack. "Like always." Her husband, David, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, steady, unreadable, before he set the tray on the table. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice neutral. The dining table gleamed under the chandelier, every fork perfectly aligned. I took my usual seat across from my sister, the polished wood cool against my palms. The aroma of garlic butter and roasted herbs filled the air, but beneath it lingered something sharper, anticipation, maybe fear. As dinner began, conversation flowed easily enough. Neighborhood gossip, rising grocery prices, the early chill of autumn. Yet under each exchange ran an undercurrent of tension, a current only I seemed to feel. My mother's glances lingered too long. My brother checked his phone more often than usual. Even the children's laughter carried a nervous edge. Halfway through the meal, my sister struck. "So," she said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin, "how's life in the bargain lane? Still clipping coupons and shopping the clearance racks?" The room quieted. I felt every eye slide toward me. My heartbeat slowed, deliberate and steady. "I've managed," I said lightly. "Sometimes the best investments aren't the most obvious." Her eyebrow arched. "Investments? That sounds ambitious." I offered a small smile but said nothing more. Let her chew on that. David cleared his throat, the sound slicing through the tension. "Speaking of investments," he said, "I have some news." He set his wineglass down with a quiet clink that drew every gaze. "After months of negotiations, a major deal closed this afternoon." My sister straightened, surprise flickering across her face. "Oh, you didn't mention." "It came together quickly," he interrupted gently. His eyes flicked toward me before returning to the table. $5 million. Signed and sealed. A collective gasp moved around the room. Even the children went silent. My mother pressed a hand to her chest. $5 million? David, that's incredible." My sister recovered fast, flashing a wide smile. "Well, darling, you certainly know how to keep a secret." David didn't return her smile. Instead, he continued, his voice calm but carrying an edge that cut through the warm air. "I couldn't have done it without some very smart guidance. Every critical decision, every pivot, came from someone who understood the numbers better than anyone at the table." The chandelier light caught the rim of his glass as he turned, eyes locking with mine. "She knows who she is." A hush settled like a heavy blanket. My sister's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her perfectly made-up face. My mother looked from David to me, her brows knitting. My brother leaned forward, curiosity bright in his eyes. I held David's gaze, my own expression carefully neutral. Inside, my pulse thrummed with the steady beat of vindication. But I said nothing. Silence, I'd learned, could be sharper than any words. My sister finally broke the quiet. "That's wonderful," she said, her voice a shade too high. "But surely you had a whole team behind you." David's eyes didn't leave mine. One voice made the difference. The tension thickened, stretching the moment like pulled wire. I felt every breath in the room, every tiny shift of fabric and silverware. My sister's hand tightened around her wine glass until her knuckles whitened. My mother cleared her throat, trying to ease the strain. "Well," she said, forcing a smile, "it sounds like we're celebrating more than just dinner tonight." David raised his glass. "To quiet brilliance," he said. "The kind that doesn't need applause to change everything." I lifted my own glass, meeting his toast with a calm smile. The wine tasted sharp and dry, each sip a quiet victory. Dinner continued, but the mood had shifted. My sister's jokes lost their edge, her laughter brittle and forced. She picked at her food, eyes darting toward David as if searching for confirmation, for control. My brother asked cautious questions about the deal, but David deflected with vague answers, each one tightening the invisible noose around the old family dynamic. As plates were cleared, I excused myself to the kitchen under the pretense of helping with dessert. Alone for a moment, I leaned against the counter, breathing in the scent of fresh coffee and warm pie. My reflection in the dark window looked different. Steadier, sharper, quietly triumphant. Footsteps approached. I turned to find David in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "You handled that perfectly," he said softly. I kept my voice low. "You didn't have to say anything tonight." He shrugged. "Some truths deserve daylight." Before I could reply, my sister's voice rang from the dining room. "David? Is dessert ready?" His eyes lingered on mine, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. Then he turned and left without another word. I followed a moment later, carrying the pie with steady hands. My sister's smile reappeared, but it no longer reached her eyes. "Lovely evening," she said, her tone brittle. "Lovely," I echoed, meeting her gaze. Neither of us blinked. As coffee was poured and pie served, small conversations resumed, but the balance of power had shifted. I could feel it in the careful way my sister addressed me, in the sudden warmth of my mother's questions, in the respectful silence from my brother. The old hierarchy had cracked, though no one dared name the change. When the evening finally wound down, coats were fetched and goodbyes exchanged, my sister hugged me with stiff arms. "Drive safe," she said, her voice tight. "Always," I replied, stepping into the cool night air. Outside, the sky stretched dark and clear, stars flickering through thin clouds. I walked to my car with measured steps, the briefcase still resting quietly in the back seat, untouched but potent. Inside lay the proof of everything David had only hinted at, a power my sister still couldn't fathom. As I slid behind the wheel, I glanced back at the house. Through the dining room window, I caught a glimpse of my sister standing alone, her smile gone, her expression unreadable. For the first time in years she looked uncertain. I started the engine, the soft purr echoing my own calm heartbeat. Tonight the tables had turned, not with shouting or spectacle but with quiet precision. And the real revelation, the one sealed inside my briefcase, was still waiting for its moment. I drove away under the cold starlight, each mile carrying me closer to Monday's final move. The road ahead gleamed slick and dark, like a promise only I fully understood. The road glistened under the cold starlight as I drove home, the soft hum of the engine matching the calm rhythm of my heart. The briefcase lay on the back seat, its quiet weight more powerful than any applause. Tonight had shifted the balance in ways my sister could not yet name, but Monday would make everything undeniable. I pulled into my driveway and cut the engine. The house waited in silence, the porch light casting a golden circle on the damp concrete. I carried the briefcase inside, each step echoing with the memory of David's toast, "To quiet brilliance." The words replayed like a slow drumbeat, steady and sure. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and rain. I set the briefcase on the kitchen table and opened it, the latch clicking like the final lock in a long game of chess. The signed contracts gleamed under the overhead light, Proof of a deal worth far more than the $5 million David had announced. He'd revealed only the surface. The truth was deeper, wider, and mine. Months ago, Mark and I had structured the investment so that the controlling stake, the real power, rested with me. David's signature secured the financing, but I held the keys. While my sister mocked my thrift store sweaters, I quietly built a network that made her husband's triumph dependent on my decisions. He could celebrate his victory tonight, but every dividend, every strategic move would flow through my desk. I ran a fingertip across the top page, feeling the raised ink of the notary seal. The paper smelled faintly of toner and promise. This was more than money. It was independence carved from years of dismissal. No one at that dinner table, least of all my sister, would ever again decide who I was. The clock read just past midnight when my phone buzzed. A message from David. We need to talk before Monday. Alone. I stared at the screen, the glow washing my hands in pale blue light. Part of me hesitated. Meeting him again carried risk. But another part welcomed the chance to set the final terms. I replied with a single word. Tomorrow. Sleep came in restless waves. I dreamed of ticking clocks, of doors opening into bright rooms where my sister stood speechless. When morning arrived, a pale sun broke through thin clouds, lighting the kitchen in soft gold. I brewed coffee and reviewed the contracts one last time. Each line confirmed what I already knew. Control rested with me. At noon, Mark called to confirm the funding transfer. Everything's locked, he said, his voice warm with quiet pride. By Monday morning, the first payments will hit your account. Thank you, I said, my throat tightening, for believing in this when no one else would. You did the work, he replied. You deserve every bit of this. After we hung up, I stood by the window watching a pair of sparrows dart across the gray sky. For years I'd measured success in small victories. Paid bills, repaired appliances, thrifted clothes that hid the strain. Today success filled the room like sunlight, undeniable and mine. Late afternoon brought another message from David confirming the meeting place. The small park near the river just after sunset. I arrived early, the autumn air crisp with the scent of wet leaves. The river glimmered under fading light as I sat on a weathered bench, briefcase by my side. David approached with careful steps, his coat collar turned up against the chill. You came, he said quietly. I keep my appointments, I replied, meeting his gaze. He sat beside me, hands clasped. I wanted to thank you. Last night. It felt good to finally see your work acknowledged. I studied his profile, the faint worry lines at the corners of his eyes. Acknowledgement is one thing, I said. Control is another. His head turned sharply. Control. I opened the briefcase and slid the top contract toward him. Read the fine print. He scanned the page, eyes narrowing as understanding dawned. You hold the majority stake. Yes, I said softly. Every major decision requires my approval. The deal is yours to celebrate, but the company is ours to steer, and I hold the final vote. David exhaled, a low sound of surprise and something like admiration. You planned this from the start. I planned to survive, I corrected. The rest followed. He leaned back, a slow smile tugging at his mouth. Your sister will lose her mind. That's not my concern, I said, though a quiet satisfaction warmed me. This isn't about humiliating her. It's about ending the years of her deciding who I'm allowed to be. David studied me for a long moment. She'll come after you when she finds out. She can try, I replied. The contracts are airtight. And I'm done playing small. For a moment we sat in silence, the river's gentle rush filling the space between us. Then David spoke, his voice softer. You know, part of me wishes I'd seen you sooner. The strength. The patience. I met his eyes but said nothing. Whatever he felt was his to wrestle with. My victory didn't need romance to validate it. As twilight deepened, we parted with a simple handshake. No promises, no secrets. Just acknowledgement of a new balance neither of us could undo. Driving home, I felt the shift settle into my bones. The revenge I'd imagined in darker moments, a public shaming, a dramatic confession, suddenly seemed too small. This was larger, cleaner. My sister would discover the truth slowly, each quarterly report a quiet reminder that the broke single mom she mocked now controlled the very success she flaunted. That night, I prepared for Monday with meticulous care. I organized the contracts, drafted meeting notes, and set aside the thrifted cardigan my sister loved to ridicule. Tomorrow I would wear it deliberately, a final wink at the game we'd been playing for years. Morning arrived bright and cold. I dressed slowly, the soft fabric of the cardigan brushing my skin like a private joke. The drive to the downtown office felt different. Lighter, freer, as if every mile carried me further from the years of quiet humiliation. Inside the glass-walled conference room, Mark greeted me with a firm handshake. The funding team followed, crisp suits and polite smiles, unaware of the personal war threaded through the paperwork. As signatures flowed and final approvals clicked into place, I felt the last remnants of doubt dissolve. By the time the final page was stamped, the company, and the power it represented, belonged to me. Walking out of that building, the autumn sun warmed my face. My phone buzzed with a new message. This time it was from my sister. "Congratulations on the deal. David finally told me everything. We need to talk." I read the words twice, a slow smile spreading. There was no anger in her text, only the brittle edge of someone realizing the ground beneath her feet had shifted. I typed a single reply. "I'm free this afternoon." No explanations. No gloating. Just availability on my terms. Back home, I set the briefcase on the kitchen table and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The rich aroma filled the room as sunlight spilled across the floor. I thought of every insult, every laugh, every moment I'd swallowed words to keep the peace. None of it mattered now. The deal was done. The power was mine. When my sister finally arrived, her knock was sharp but hesitant. I opened the door and met her eyes. For the first time she looked unsure. "You planned this," she said, stepping inside. "All of it." "I planned my life," I answered simply. "You just didn't see it." Her gaze flicked to the briefcase on the table. "And now?" "Now," I said, pouring 2 cups of coffee, "we see what happens when underestimation meets preparation." She accepted the cup without a word. The silence between us was no longer hostile. It was heavy with a new truth neither of us could deny. She knew the game was over. So did I. After she left, I stood at the window watching her car disappear down the street. A cool breeze carried the scent of wet leaves and something sweeter. Freedom, perhaps. My heart felt light, not from the money but from the quiet certainty that I had reclaimed my story. I closed the door, the latch clicking softly behind me, and whispered the final truth to the empty room. "I was never small. You just couldn't see me." The words lingered in the warm air, a victory richer than any fortune. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join our community for more powerful revenge stories of women who refuse to be underestimated.